How does an American kid from Chicago with Italian origins become so passionate about the Italian diaspora and Italian culture? In honor of reaching 10,000 followers on Instagram, I wanted to put together this video to tell a little bit of my story and why I started Oriundi. To tell you a little bit about me, I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, born and raised in an Italian American household. My parents grew up in what I would call a traditional Italian American enclave right outside of the city of Chicago. And I grew up in a suburb called Downers Grove, which is your traditional American suburb in a lot of ways. A lot of parks, trees, really nice style of living. But there was not really that Italian culture piece there, Italian American culture, like what my parents grew up with. So a lot of my culture came from my household, and I feel like I never really was that similar to anybody that I grew up with or a lot of my friends and stuff like that, due to the fact that I had a little bit of a different way of living in my home. My parents were very Italian American, old school, blue collar, and I was always kind of the token Italian kid in the neighborhood since we didn't have a lot. So it was always kind of that specific thing. And now that I've moved out of the Chicago area, I've lived in Miami now 4 years. I also kind of get the being kind of that token Italian or Italian American, and also the Chicagoan. So those are kind of parts of my identity that I've been given, whether I like it or not. I'm not gonna lie, I have no problem. But those are two things that have been given to me through who I am as a person and a lot of the values that I have. So like I said, born and raised in Chicago, then went off to school, and I've lived in Miami pretty much in the time after college. And in my childhood, like I said, I grew up in this Italian American household. We had a lot of values and aspects that came from what a number of Italian American communities had, which a lot of you could relate to. And then I'll never forget, I think I was 10, was my first trip to Italy. And that had a significant impact on me because it was a trip with my parents and my older sister and some family friends. And it was my family's first trip to Italy, including my parents. And I didn't grow up speaking Italian. My parents don't speak the language, which is very common in the US to have lost the language after a number of generations. My background on my dad's side my Italian background is Genovese and Tuscan. And on my mom's side is Campanian and Sicilian. So I have a kind of mix from all over Italy. I don't really have a major regional tie like a lot of other Italian Americans or people in the Italian diaspora that can usually pinpoint like one or two regions. I'm truly all over from my ancestry. And going to Italy, we did a lot of the main touristy cities for our first time there: Venice, Rome, Florence, and then we did a number of days in a lot of small towns in Tuscany as well. It was a 3-week trip, so it was truly an amazing experience. My mom's really well versed on travel. I was blessed to grow up internationally traveling a lot. So even though we went to those well-known touristy cities, fortunately I didn't have to only have the experience of like the only thing I saw was the Colosseum and the Rialto Bridge in Venice or something like that. We had a lot of cool, more, I would say, individualistic experiences as well. So that was a fundamental first trip for me because I got to see the Italian culture and in different regions for the first time. And I felt almost like, it sounds cliche, but like I was home. It was one of the places in the world that I felt like people were a lot like me. There was a lot of values, characteristics, sociability, personalities, just ways of interacting that were very comfortable for me, that were very familiar. And me and my sister picked up a little bit of the language just so we could be able to speak with, people in restaurants and hotels and stuff. And we were young, so just being able to do that. And then, coming back after that trip, or just in general in my childhood, I took Spanish in school growing up, and I had an older sister as well who introduced me to some Latin music when I was young. And I'm not gonna lie, I fell in love with a lot of aspects of it. I really enjoy different genres within Latin music, and I started, learning the language and listening to a lot of the music when I was younger, also while internationally traveling. I think a lot of that gave me kind of a global perspective and a global mindset on the world in general. Um, so I think that kind of started the ball rolling, and then I got into college and I had the opportunity to take this international business course where we got to travel to Brazil after the course. And one of my classmates, we did a project with a Brazilian class for this course at my university. And one of my classmates, when we first got to Brazil, like the first night, introduced me to someone in her group who was a Brazilian guy. We were 20 years older or so at the time, of Italian descent. We were kind of like those token Italians. So for a lot of you that have been introduced just because you are Italian and there's the other Italian in the room, whether they're off the boat, whether they're Italian American, whether they're whatever, that was one of those moments for me. We became really good friends. I went back to Brazil to visit him. He's been to the US. We've stayed in touch. And it was crazy because we had so much in common just from our heritage. We shared a lot of interests and values, and he grew up in the suburbs basically of Sao Paulo. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Completely different life experiences, completely different world, but we had so much in common just off the bat because of our heritage. So that opened my eyes to like, wait a second, there is really this entire population of people in the rest of the world with Italian heritage that are a lot like me. I grew up in the Chicago area. I knew a lot about Italian Americans in Chicago and on the East Coast, and obviously going to Italy, understanding some of that culture. But I didn't realize some of these places that aren't as well known. They should be, but they're not. Italians going to Canada or Australia or Brazil. After that Brazil trip, I also went to Buenos Aires shortly thereafter. I'll never forget, we had a tour guide there doing some tour of the city that was Argentinian from an Italian family. And his insights were really interesting about the Italian impact in Argentina. So again, at that 20-year-old range, I was really starting to get inundated with these experiences and knowledge about the Italian community outside of just the US and Italy. And then because of who I am, a very curious person, a very obsessive, I guess, in informational sense, I dived deep. I started watching a lot of videos, got into Wikipedia rabbit holes, reading about all these different aspects of Italian culture in the world. And then, like I said before, I also had kind of learned Spanish in school. I had learned Spanish in school, and I decided that I wanted to pick up Italian as well in college because it's the language of my ancestors. I just felt it was right to do it because it had been lost in my family. I only took a couple of courses. The majority of the Italian I learned was on my own. I kind of figured out a process to learn languages somewhat efficiently without the necessity of an institution or a class, at least for me personally. Following Italian, I learned Portuguese 100% on my own, and I'm in the process of doing the same with French right now. And then that's probably it, because that's enough Latin languages. My mind will just start getting way too confused with with all that. But within learning Italian, it connected me even further to my roots. Like, I also got the opportunity to study in Italy and live in a home with an Italian family, and that helped me improve my Italian, and it also helped me connect better with the modern Italy, because a lot of our Italian diaspora folks were very connected to what Italy maybe used to be and what our ancestors lived it and saw it in their lens, and obviously things change. So there's that, right? And then I would say after all of that level of experiences, meeting people, just being interested in different cultures in general, coming from Chicago, which is very culturally diverse, then moving to Miami, which is very Latin American diverse, and having experiences with all these different cultures, whether it be music, whether it be history or immigration, or all these different topics that I was passionate about and that others were able to add into my life, whether it was through experiences, conversations, or et cetera, et cetera. Then I came here, moved here, and got the opportunity last year for the first time and this year for the second time to go to the Italian American Future Leaders event, which is an event for people between Italian American adults between the ages of 21 and 35. It's a weekend event in Sunrise, Florida. And this event is for promoting, Italian culture within the U.S. We have a lot of different presentations, social hours, events, etc. within the weekend. And it was a great experience. I realized that, last year was like 220 people, this year about 300. I realized there's a lot of people that have a lot of passion for their heritage as well, just like me. And a lot of older people in the Italian diaspora don't think that the younger people are going to carry forward the traditions and the festas and all of those things that they held so dear. But I saw in this room a lot of people that were like me and really passionate about keeping our culture alive. Albeit obviously our mixed culture, our Italian American culture, because a grand majority of people in that room are American and US born, 1, 2, 3, 4 generations. There's some Canadians there, there's some Italians as well from Italy. But that was a great event and a great motivation as well for me to get started on Oriundi, which I started last year. Because of all of the things that I mentioned that are passions of mine, it was things I was already doing in my free time. And now I'm just promoting this research that I do and this passion that I have to the world. And I saw that there was a big gap in the Italian diaspora being talked about in media. So obviously Italy is Italy, it's its own sovereign nation. There's a lot of news and a lot of different things that go on. Italy's covered. The Italian American community is very strong, especially in media, in good and bad ways. So people know a lot about the East Coast Italian American and Chicago Italian American community. But there's also a lot of Italian American communities. Like, I didn't know growing up how big of an Italian influence there was in San Francisco or New Orleans or places like that, or Cleveland. And I've learned that as I've gotten into the depths of this research, and that's within my own country. And then you look further and you see these massive populations in Canada, Australia, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay. And the coolest part is that we're able to connect so easily because our base culture comes from Italy, albeit Italy has a lot of different cultures within it, but they hold a level of similarity. And even though people went to different places with different local customs and different languages, they kept a lot of those cultural values, characteristics, over generations. And so when you meet someone of Italian descent, regardless of where they're from, oftentimes it's much easier to connect than just any random person that you meet in passing, because of that shared kind of cultural identity that we have. And believe me, I've seen that in places in the United States, in Brazil, and Uruguay, and Argentina, from people of Italian descent from Australia and Canada, and even in Europe, in different countries. We really do share something beautiful because we have such a strong culture that it permeates through the generations and sticks around even when there's no ancestors left from the old country. So I think promoting Italian culture through the entire diaspora, but through positivity, through knowledge, through visiting these communities, and just understanding that we have so much in common, we have so much to share, and we have our local differences and our local unique characteristics, which are also fun to discover, whether it's food, whether it's the way that we talk, whether it's the way that we do a Sunday dinner or things like that. I think those are really cool to take a look at as well. And I've really enjoyed doing this. I've enjoyed interacting with a lot of people. And I really want to also give a big thank you to all the people who have been following and supporting this movement and this project, especially all of the respectful comments and the respectful direct messages that have not only been great to read and great to interact with, but also have helped me learn more, have helped make this a exchange of knowledge rather than, me just doing research and giving knowledge via social media, but also getting it back. I really enjoyed that. And a lot of people who have left comments or direct messaged me, I've used a lot of ideas that I've seen in those areas and have done research on for a lot of my videos. So thank you for, sharing your stories and sharing your knowledge, because again, there's so much knowledge out there. There's so many different unique stories that it's beautiful to see. And I look forward to everything to come with this project, getting to meet so many more people, getting to visit so many more Italian communities within the United States and within other countries, and to really see all the beauty that the Italian culture and has imprinted on the world within Italy and of course beyond. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself and give a little bit of a story to why I'm doing what I'm doing, and also a big thank you for those of you that have supported thus far. And I look forward to continuing to connect our Italian diaspora one story at a time. Siamo Oriundi. Thank you so much, and ciao for now.